Joining us right now on the phone is the man who exposed the Bigfoot hoax, Steve Kulls, private investigator and executive director of Squatchdetective.com.
The numbers of sightings, even if you take 99% of them and put them in the trash can, you turn around, you still have that 1% that can't be explained. Well, we need to explain it.
And then this thing walks across the road, makes a turn towards us. All I can remember is flipping the light on, and I see this creature.
Went to look forward, and there was a big black thing, is all I can call it.
The whole time, the whole thing was shadowing us, right behind us, right on the side of us.
I still see that damn thing to this day. It wasn't 20 feet from me.
You could see it standing from the moonlight in the tree line.
I was just scanning right to left, and it reminded me of like a gorilla.
Get somebody out here. Son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Welcome to Squatch-D TV, exploring the Bigfoot mystery each week with your hosts, veteran researcher, author, and TV personality, the Squatch Detective, Steve Kulls, and from the Bigfoot Research Project of Kentucky, Chris Bennett. Sit back and buckle up as we bring you guests from around North America discussing the Bigfoot phenomena, but not without a few laughs too. Here are your hosts, Steve and Chris.
Hey, good evening, cyberspace. Welcome to Squatch-D TV for today's date, April 16, 2023. Got a little bit of a stutter repeat there in there. I'm your host, your guide, the Squatch Detective, Steve Kulls, along with my co-host, Mr. Chris Bennett.
Steve,
welcome
going,
one
man?
And all. Here we are. And
I've been enjoying this weather, dude. This has been nice. I hope you guys in New York have been having this kind of weather.
Certainly have. It's actually been quite warm.
Yeah.
Gonna have to put the air conditioners in this week, I think. Just because, and that's strange for April.
Yeah, well, that's what we did. We had to switch from turn the heat setting off and switch over to the AC setting one day last week because it was like in the 80s, which, it really cooked the upstairs. It was really warm up there. But
and the interesting thing is that we go back to the 50s for a couple of days this week.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. A lot going on as far as what I got planned. I'm going to be doing a little scouting trip this week.
Yeah.
And taking a familiar voice with us, and we'll get to that later next week. I don't want to ruin any surprises for anybody. But anywho, other than that, it's been quiet week.
Well, I've got rid of what?
It's been a quiet week.
Yeah, it has.
So folks, good to see everybody. And guess what, Chris? Yeah. Guess what?
What, bud?
I still have a Facebook page. 3 of them, actually.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Still have an Instagram page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Twitter page is still up. TikTok is still up. And hey, the YouTube channel's still up.
Great.
And it will be tomorrow, it will be next week, and it will be next year, and it will be, hopefully, God willing, the next decade down the road.
Yeah. Unfortunately, no matter how much someone would like to censor you or censor the truth, that's not the way it works in the United States of America.
No, and to think that way and to shut somebody down who put something out there as the truth, that's un-American, and that's more likely to a government that existed somewhere in the 30s into the mid 40s. Not this one. So anyway, getting aside from that, let's do our roll call. So
wow. The chat is hopping. Hey, guys.
Always. So we got Ammon Chris in the house. Uncle Bones 2, Grasshopper, Sandra Piper, John Swan.
Hey, John.
Pat Collins. Hello, Pat.
Hi, Pat.
Gary Johnson.
Hey, Gary.
Daniel Weeks.
Daniel.
Angel Nolan.
Angel.
We got Joe over at the Bigfoot Atheist Inquiry.
Good to see you, bud.
Going down. Nikki over at Hairy Man Hoaxes and Hoodwinks.
Hey, Nikki. Yeah, I just watched part of your show. I was lurking.
Yeah. Eyes in the Woods. John McSomething. Flutang. Jay Fritz. Hello, Jay. Brett from the Tall Ones in the house.
Brett.
Raptor Crazy. Eyes in the Woods.
Raptor.
Little Kilroy was here. Sharon. B. Lynn. Hey, B. Helter, a.k.a. Faster Man.
Faster Man.
Who else we got floating around here? Pete H. Hello, Pete. Arthur Watch in the house.
Arthur?
Chessboard. There he is. Chessboard's out there. He's doing taxes. I'm so sorry. Yes, tomorrow is the deadline, I believe. Tracy Benna. Hello. Good to see you.
Tracy?
And I think that's it for now. Oh, Rowdy Rout's in the house.
I'm still scrolling, so I can't, I don't think you missed anybody, but if we did, it ain't cause we don't love you, because we sure do love everybody.
That's right. Remember, we have the meats. Anyway, what a week it's been. And for anybody who just was coming over from Nikki's channel, great show over there. If you missed it, catch it back in replay. Had Nikki, of course, with me on, and Matt Knapp from Bigfoot Crossroads, and Steve Alcorn, formerly of the Bigfoot Anarchy blog.
Yeah.
Great investigative reporter.
Steve Alcorn. I hadn't heard him in a long time. It was good to see him, or good to hear him. Yeah, I saw him too.
Nikki got him to come out of retirement.
Yeah. Good job, Nikki.
So I wanted to take a look at a couple of interesting reports that have come out. One is a very old one, and we've discussed a little bit here before. And another one is rather recently. I believe it's circa 2000. Look at the exact date. 2000 is when it started. It probably was going on since 99, but it climaxed in the year 2000, some 23 years ago. So the first one I want to talk about is, first of all, Chris, do you have anything you want to get off your chest?
No, I'm good. I'm good with everything. I'm really good with everything.
Okay. To tell you the truth, I had to kind of talk Chris off the ledge. Especially when somebody, becomes very stereotypical.
Yeah, well.
But we said that last week with the whole confirmation bias thing. That's how.
Confirming what we've already said is confirming what we've already said and believe is nothing new.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Kudos and salutations.
So anyway, I'd like to talk first about the story of Jacko, the 1884 story of Jacko. And we, right. I was blessed to have Thomas Steenberg on before a couple of times and talk a little bit about his actual investigation into it.
Yeah.
Fascinating
case.
Fascinating. It is. And whether or not it's true, I don't know.
Right.
So this came out in the July 4th issue of The Colonist in Victoria, British Columbia, under the headline of What Is It? Now, the interesting thing is that July 4th in some places is considered like April Fool's Day. So that is something of note. But the subline is, what is it? A strange creature captured above Yale. A British Columbian gorilla. And it said in the immediate vicinity of number 4 tunnel situated some 20 miles above this village, which was Yale, are bluff of rock, which have hitherto, imagine using hitherto in today's language.
Wow. Yeah.
Have hitherto been insurmountable, but on Monday morning last week were successfully scaled by Mr. Anderson's employees on the regular train from Lytton. Mr. Cosserson, the British Columbia Express Company's messenger, and number of men from Lytton and points east of that place succeeded in capturing a creature which may be truly half man, half beast. Jacko, as his captors have called the creature, is something of the gorilla type, standing about 4 feet 7 inches in height and weighing 127 pounds. He has long, black, strong hair and resembles a human being with one exception. His entire body, excepting his hands or paws and feet, is covered with glossy hair about 1 inch long. His forearm is much longer than a man's forearm, and he possesses extraordinary strength, as he will take a hold of a stick and break it by wrenching it or twisting it, which no man living could break in the same way.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think that was one of the things that I liked best about the story.
Right. Well, here's the interesting thing. We know a Sasquatch is a primate.
Right.
They're describing what the hair should be like, which we have known the hair to be like. It's covered in hair, not fur.
Right.
The palms of its hands are bare. Yeah. So somebody who wrote this article would have to know either gorilla anatomy or gorilla features, which this is 1884, very well.
The extra length of the forearm.
The length of the forearm being longer than that of a man.
Yeah.
Those are very intricate points for a kind of made-up story, I believe.
Yeah.
There now, not saying that that's for sure.
No, the guy that made up the story wrote the story could have made it up. He could have been very well versed in gorilla anatomy or primate
But
anatomy.
very strange for 1884, because think of that time period.
Right.
And you're talking about British Columbia, Canada, which is about the furthest point from any gorilla you can be in North America.
Yeah.
Right. So it is very interesting.
Wow.
Since his capture, he is very reticent, only occasionally uttering a noise, which is half bark, half growl. Interesting. He is, however, becoming daily more attached to his keeper, Mr. George Tilbury of this place, who proposes shortly starting for London, England, to exhibit him. His favorite food so far is berries, and he drinks fresh milk with evident relish. By advice of Dr. Harrington, raw meats have been withheld from Jacko, as the doctor thinks it would have a tendency to make him a savage.
Well, that's interesting. The berries and the milk,
The mode of capture was as follow. Ned Austin, the engineer on the coming in the sight of the bluff at the eastern end of number 4 tunnel, saw what he supposed to be a man lying asleep in close proximity to the track, and as quick as a thought blew the signal to apply the brakes. The brakes were instantly applied, and in a few seconds the train was brought to a standstill. Now, this is where I have a problem with this story. You have a train coming. That doesn't sneak up on somebody.
Right.
At this moment, the supposed man sprang up and, uttering a sharp, quick bark, began to climb the steep bluff. Again, I find that a little hard to believe, because if you think about the way this sets up, you got a train coming. Oh, it stops the train. Now with the train, they don't stop on a dime, number one.
Right.
Number 2, train brakes squeal like a mother.
Yep.
And only when it stops, it springs up and lets a bark out and runs up the hill. So that part to me sounds a little inconceivable.
A little questionable, yeah. I agree.
Right. Conductor R.J. Craig and express messenger Cosserton followed the baggage man and brake man, jumped from the train, and knowing they were some 20 minutes ahead of schedule, immediately gave chase. So why are you chasing this thing to begin with? Right?
Yeah.
Why would you chase it? And without a weapon, without, after 5 minutes of perilous climbing, the supposed demented Indian was corralled on a projecting shelf of a rock where he could neither ascend nor descend.
That sounds a little suspicious.
Right. The query now was how to capture him alive, which was quickly decided by Mr. Craig, who crawled on his hands and knees until he was about 40 feet above the creature. Well, wait a minute. The creature couldn't ascend. This man apparently went above it. Taking a small piece of loose rock, he let it fall, and it had the desire. So they basically dropped a rock on the creature's head and
they
knocked him
brained
out.
him. Yeah.
Or as Mo Howard would say, boys give.
Yeah.
Right.
They knocked him out. Okay.
So then they lowered him via rope to, as they quoted, terra firma. Yeah. And then they firmly finding him and placing him in the baggage car, off brakes was sounded and the train started for Yale. At the station, a large crowd who had heard of the capture by telephone from Spasm Flat were assembled, and each was one anxious to have the first look at the monstrosity. Again, I find that highly suspect.
Yeah, I mean, how do they know it was going to be there? I mean,
were there telephone lines on trains in 1884? There were telegraph, maybe, but how did that work? I don't know. I mean, I suppose they had some sort of, but they didn't have wireless communication.
I mean, yeah, he didn't pull out his iPhone and let everybody know be there,
They were disappointed as Jacko had been taken off the machine shops and placed in charge of his present keeper. The questions naturally arises, how came the creature where it was first seen by Mr. Austin? Just really weird. From the bruises about its head and body and apparent soreness since its capture, it is supposed that Jacko ventured too near the edge of that bluff, slipped and fell, and lay where found until the sound of the rushing train aroused him. So now they're building that excuse that,
well, poor Jacko just wasn't very good at climbing, was he? I mean, he couldn't ascend, and the train guy goes up and then hits him in the head with a rock from above.
So they're trying to say he was knocked unconscious. It wasn't till the sound of the train aroused him, but apparently it didn't arouse the creature until the train stopped.
Right. Yeah.
And that's another thing too. I mean, you're coming around a bend and you see the creature in the thing, and you're going to blow your whistle, you're going to blow your horn, you're going to start applying the brakes. You should be hearing it by then.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't get off the track, are you going to actually stop in time?
Yeah, not really.
Right.
You can blow the horn and hope that they move, but you've seen the videos of those guys hitting cars and stuff now, and trucks at train crossings. Plus, you got to think, we're talking about like a steam locomotive back in them days. Those things weren't exactly, the brakes on today's trains are really great compared to what they had.
Right.
Some guys pulling back on a handle with a stick rubbing against the wheel or something.
Yeah, and then they have to try to throw the engine in reverse to get the wheels to go the other way.
Oh, man.
And
B's got a good statement here. She said, I wonder if Jacko could have been simply a person with a special needs or birth defects.
I think the whole story, the way it was captured, I think is baloney.
Well, yeah.
Because if it's a person with special needs, why would you brain them with a rock?
Yeah.
You could kill somebody, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Then it would have been murder.
What is the one, the thing where the people have the overactive hair follicles, hypertrichinosis or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It, very well could have been a human with that. But
yeah, but then the person would be running around naked.
Yeah, and then when they were talking about the extended length forearm and stuff, that doesn't match up.
Trying to think if there's anything else. From bruises about its head and body and apparent soreness since its capture, it's supposed that Jacko ventured too near the edge of the bluff, slipped and fell, and lay where found until the sound of the rushing train aroused him. Mr. Thomas White, C.E. Gowan, as well as Mr. Major, who kept a small store about a half mile west of the tunnel during the past 2 years, have mentioned seeing a curious creature at different points between camps 13 and camp 17, but no attention was paid to their remarks as people came to conclude that they had seen either a bear or a stray Indian dog.
Yeah.
Who can unravel the mystery that now surrounds Jacko? Does he belong in a species hitherto unknown in this part of the continent, or is he really what the trainman first thought he was, just a crazy Indian? An old man named August Castle, who was a child in the town at the time, subsequently confirmed newspaper accounts of Jacko. The fate of the captive is not known, although some said he was shipped east by rail in a cage on the way to be exhibited in a sideshow, but died in transit. The same paper recorded a consistent stream of other sightings from then on. So,
well, there's some things that I liked. The story, it kind of leans towards being a little hokey at times. But the one thing that kind of lines up with modern Bigfooting is the method of breaking the stick. And most of the people that have been in an area where there was a sighting have witnessed these creatures either reach out and grab something as they walk, or they've investigated after the sighting, and they found that the sticks or the limbs that were broken from the trees were not only broken down, but they were twisted. And that twist is very, very specific to a type of behavior. Other than that, that's all I've got about Jacko that I liked. That's the specific wrenching of the twig, to break it. That rings true. Everything else, to me.
And here's the interesting. On July 11th, 1884, the newspaper British Columbian reported that about 200 people went to view Jacko at the jail where he was supposedly kept, but the people found only a man at the jail who fielded questions about a creature that did not exist.
Kaiju Ninja says, were there other Bigfoot stories during that time? Was the subject much known in 1884? I'm sure there are, or there were.
I have, in British Columbia, I'm not so sure, but I have tracked Bigfoot stories as early back as 1818, coming from Sackett's Harbor, New York.
Yeah.
Which described a wild man covered in reddish brown or, reddish hair.
Right.
In 1879, we have the Powell, Vermont wild man, which was seen by a couple of hunters, youth hunters, that saw this wild man in reddish brown hair drop their muskets and ran back home, leaving their muskets behind. They were so startled by it. And gubernatorial candidate Jonas Galusha at the time in Vermont actually ran on a ticket of, I vow I will capture the wild man. He ran on that ticket. So yeah, there have been sighting reports that have occurred.
Daniel Boone's account where he shot the yeehaw was in the mid-late 1700s in Kentucky. So,
and if I can suggest a book to people, and it's on the Squatchdetective.com website, which the website is now up and running, by the way. There was a little issue with the domain provider. They had a little glitch in their system. They got it fixed. There is a book written by Chad Arment called The Historical Bigfoot. And I think we've had Chad on the show way back in the day when we were on Blog Talk. And that's a great book. It has a lot of those types of stories. Throughout, noting different periods of time. And the interesting thing I've always found is, even from an anthropological standpoint, we have called them different things. We've called them ape men, baboon-like men, baboon men, wild men, and eventually, called them gorillas. In the early 1900s on Long Island, of all places, there were sightings of gorilla men that were running around. And of course, that area was very underdeveloped at the time as well.
Yeah. Well, I had to look it up, but it was 1902. I remember it was the early 1900s when they first got a species of a mountain gorilla on file. So actually, the official scientific discovery of the mountain gorilla was 1902.
Right, but they did know the lowlands gorillas.
Yes. Right. They had a skull in what is it, 1847? Yeah.
Yes.
A skull.
So this is about 30 some odd years after the discovery of the lowlands gorilla.
Right.
So it's very interesting how this all. Now, if we go back even further, we go back to the 1750s when we have, Rogers Rangers, and I've said this before, where there was a recording in the troop Rangers diary that they had to fire a volley of shot at a group of bears throwing rocks at them.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not those bears were Sasquatch, or perhaps some Native Americans dressed in animal furs throwing rocks at them, I'm not sure. But so we have to be reticent that could it be, Native Americans. That now I have not done research enough to know whether or not that the Aboriginal Native Americans of that area during that time period wore skins or, furs of animals. But this is the time when fur trading was a real thing, especially between the French and the Native Americans.
Yeah.
And of course, the French were always at odds. And the French and Native Americans were kind of aligned, and they were against the British, which the Roberts Rangers were. So is it completely out of character for a group of perhaps unarmed Indians that were trapping, or perhaps even French trappers that had the skins on that decided to throw some rocks at the Rangers coming by to get them away from them? Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. So there is, there are arguments for everything, and you have to take everything that predates, modern media, which I would say modern media began in about the 1920s, really. Well, 1910. About 1910 is when the modern media, where you started getting newspaper accounts, because we all know the Titanic sank in 1912, and that was some very authentic and very good reporting. So, of course, you had the Spanish-American War and so you have, some accurate reporting after the 1900s, and, the 1800s, they did some of these things sometimes just to sell newspapers.
Yeah.
That was their YouTube.
Yeah. It was not uncommon for them to make up the story of the day.
Correct. But we have to go back to Samuel D. Champlain talking to the Micmac Native Americans, talking about the Gogoo, which meant hairy man beast, and that was along the St. Lawrence River on the Canadian-New York borders, and the whole Canadian Vermont borders and New Hampshire borders and Maine borders. So, what a coincidence! The anniversary of the Titanic was yesterday. Some cold water.
No, Pat, that was prior to the 1800s in the 17. In 1799, Daniel Boone moved from Kentucky to Missouri, so he wasn't even living in Kentucky in 1800.
Yep.
Good history, though.
Kaiju Ninja asked, "What do I think of Albert Ostman?"
My favorite.
Yes, Chris loves Albert. Well, we'll shoot with Chris first on this one since that question came up. And that's what I love about these types of shows. Sometimes we'll just let the discussion. Now, I got another case more recent, some 23 years ago, surrounded by some controversy, which is very interesting. But it's a story that isn't very well told nowadays, that has kind of been lost. And I want to bring this out. And but anyway, go ahead, Chris. Albert Ostman.
Well, I love the Albert Ostman story, and I don't have it in front of me, but we'll just kind of brief it down a little bit, shorten it down. Albert Ostman lived in British Columbia when he was a younger man. He did lots of work around. I think he worked at a lumber mill. I think he did some logging. I think he did some carpentry work, and in his younger days, he would work for a time, like a year or so, and save up enough money, and then he would take off work for like a month or two and take a vacation, which, how many people wouldn't love to still do that today? But that was his goal in life, save up enough money to go have a vacation. And now his idea of a vacation, he was going to look for a lost gold mine. And now that is really cool. That's the old days of adventure there. And he had been doing some studying, and he had found a place where was the name of the place? Dang it. Oh, gosh. I should have really brought this up and so I could reference the names of the places and stuff. But,
Toba Inlet.
Yeah. He had heard a rumor that there was a gold mine somewhere, an old abandoned gold mine, somewhere up past the Toba Inlet. And so he had hired a guide to take him in there. Okay, let's condense it a little bit more. Okay, the guide dropped him off, and so he's got his camping gear and his pack, and he tracks up, several miles for several days, and then he makes camp. Then he breaks the camp and then finds a better place to camp. Okay, he starts noticing some stuff getting moved around his camp at night, and he's missing things like pancake mix, prunes. He had packages of prunes, and he started noticing some of those were turning up missing. So he stays up late at night, one night, trying to catch. He was thinking it was porcupines. And for some reason, I've never had one, but he said porcupines make great stew. So I guess he was going to stay up, get the porcupine, and eat it. But maybe great. I don't know. I've never had one. If you've had one, let me know. But he gets supposedly picked up in the middle of the night in his sleeping bag and carried away by a Bigfoot. And his description was really compelling about when the creature, he could tell that when it was going uphill, it would get kind of out of breath, and he could hear it grunt as it was, as it was carrying him and itself up the hill. And every now and then he said it would make a little cough sound, which that really rings true. Now that could be one of the arts of a good storyteller, though. He might have been adding those little details in there to really hook you in. But some of the things he described were very ingenious, and I don't really think that a storyteller could have known enough about primates. This guy, evidently had no background in primatology. So I don't think some of the things he mentioned could actually have been made up. I think they ring very true. He described particularly that they would eat. They were eating the small shoots off the conifer shoots off the pine trees. Now that was very interesting, and we've had some reports of similar things happening in the United States with these creatures. He described the female Sasquatch gathering grass with a long root that was really sweet. Now that was interesting.
Hey, Chris, let me give you a little excerpt. Now this comes from On the Track of the Sasquatch by John Green, where he actually prints, including the affidavit of Albert Ostman.
Oh, good, yeah.
This is Ostman's entire story, as told by him, in very big detail. And then,
yes.
So let me give you. You talked about where stuff had acted or became a little strange.
Right.
So I'll start this. Late that day, I found an exceptionally good campsite. It was 2 good-sized cypress trees glowing close together near a rock wall with a nice spring just below the trees. I intended to make this my permanent camp. I cut lots of brush for my bed between these trees. I rigged up a pole from this rock wall to hang my backpack, my pack sack on, and arranged some flat rocks for my fireplace for cooking. I had a really classy setup. I shot a grouse just before I came to this place.
Yeah.
Too late to roast that tonight. I would do that tomorrow. And that's when things began to happen. I'm a heavy sleeper. Not much disturbs me after I go to sleep, especially on a good bed like I had now. Next morning, I noticed things had been disturbed during the night, but nothing missing that I could see. I roasted my grouse on a stick for my breakfast about 9 a.m. I started out prospecting. I always carried my rifle with me. Your rifle is your most important equipment. So, I mean, that's the level of detail in telling a story. So, I'm sorry, Chris, you can continue on. I just wanted to.
It's just, what I was going by, though the reason why I liked the story is it had a lot of now when John Green first interviewed him, I believe this was 1957, Steve, if I'm not mistaken. And what Ostman said this had happened to him back in 1924, I believe was the year it happened to him when he was a younger man. So Mr. Green interviewed him in 57, and he got this story. Now, some of the things that were in it. Also, some of the things not in the story were pretty fascinating that he'd spoken with to Mr. Green. And but some of the things in the story, he said that they would made a sound when he tried to leave. They would push back at him and make a sound like soka, soka. Okay, so that would kind of, indicate that they had some sort of verbal communication.
And the amazing thing is in this book, and I got to thank my good friend who gifted me this, because I never found this before, but he had found this. He's a comic book collector, and he had found this. And knowing my propensity, he got me this and said, "Here you go." So I don't think he paid very much for this.
Wow.
But if he did, even better. But and funny, we were talking about Jacko. It even has the original Jacko article in it.
Yeah.
So fascinating stuff. It's a great read. I go through it for certain things. And you want to talk about the classics? It has Albert Ostman, Jacko, William Rowe, Ruby Creek, Ape Canyon,
the classics,
Roger Patterson, the Blue Creek Mountain tracks, Just, I mean, this is history, and this is in primo shape.
Right.
Primo shape. So,
now, the descriptions of the creatures, I found it. I brought it up now, Steve. The Ostman described, one of them, the young fellow. Okay, now he was supposedly captured and held by a group of 4. There was the old man, which was the male, the mature male, the mother, or the old lady, as Ostman called her, which was the mature female, and there were 2 young ones, a boy and a girl. Now he said the young fellow might have been between 11 and 18 years old and about 7 feet tall, and might weigh about 300 pounds. His chest would be 50 to 55 inches, his waist about 36 to 38 inches. Ostman said he had wide jaws, narrow forehead that slanted upward, round at the back, about 4 or 5 inches higher than the forehead. So he's describing, that's a very good description of a sagittal crest, wouldn't you say, Steve?
I would agree with that 100%. Grasshopper made a comment, Steve depicts the Blue Creek tracks and the fake track with the square toes. Correct. I'm pretty sure that the Blue Creek tracks were actually Ray Wallace tracks. A lot of people say there was never any evidence that Ray Wallace had made any tracks anywhere, but you look at the phony tracks, they look a lot like the Blue Creek tracks to me. Too. Even though John Green did kind of try to deny that.
Yes.
God rest his soul. Well, it's kind of tough when you're invested in some stuff sometimes to admit. Again, that happens. We've seen that this week.
There was a condition though. He thought that those tracks could never be faked because they were actually raised up above the surrounding dirt around them, and I think what that was, that subsoil was so fine and powdery when that stomper packed that down. They had a light mist of rain, and the light mist of rain kind of powdered and kind of lowered everything around it. But since that stomper had packed that one area, it remained intact, And so he had a couple of different things going on there, and he kind of tied them together. He thought they were the same thing, I think. I can't say what was going on in the mind of John Green.
And Jess says, if it was 7 foot tall with a 50 to 55 inch chest, it seems 300 pounds would be too light.
Yeah.
Very well possible, but don't forget, we're talking about height and weight estimations, and that's all they are, estimations.
Yeah.
So could it be heavier? Absolutely. Could be 300, could be 400 pounds.
Right.
People might, that's the one thing about witnesses, A, B, C, D, correct. Yes. Here's this creature in front of me. It's large. It's got long hair. It has a sagittal crest. How tall is it? 7 foot, maybe 300 pounds.
Right.
Height and weight can be off. That's why, people, the skeptics for years, and I mentioned this, actually, I did an interview for a gentleman who's writing a book actually on lake cryptids.
Yeah. And
with my experience with Loch Ness, he asked me to be part of that. And as I explained, the skeptics love to use the term that, witnesses are the worst kind of evidence because they're never reliable. Well, they are reliable. And I always point this out. There's a bank robbery. We all can say, hey, this guy walked out of the store at this time or about this time.
And I think, it goes with the human perception. They're used to seeing humans. So if they see a big guy, barrel-chested guy with big arms, he's 6'2", and he weighs 240 pounds. Okay. So they think you add, from 6'2" to 7 foot, probably another 60 pounds more. When in reality, it would probably be like another 150 pounds more.
You can never trust somebody's estimations necessarily. They're not going to be exact. And who knows, maybe this was a typo. I could pull out the original. Maybe he was just bad at estimating weight. It happens. I've seen people, claim that a person that had stolen from the store has got to be, a really, he was really tall. And the person looking at it was 5'4", and the person that was, taking the items was, maybe 6 foot tall. But really tall isn't 6 foot's not really tall. But compared to them, you're 6 inches taller. So perspective can be very different. Some in weight, same thing. I happen to be very good at guesstimating weights and heights because I've done it for so long. I've looked at people, apprehended them, get their official height or get their ID and see how tall they are and how much they weigh and all that stuff. And that's really easy, So after a while, you get really good at it. But if you're not used to saying, hey, for example, how tall is my neighbor across the street? Maybe 6 foot tall, but I could be off by a couple inches. Maybe 250 pounds. I could be off. He could be 300. He could be 200. I could be wrong. So
now
I'm not going to put too much into, again, especially recounting it some 25 years later. Remember, this recounting is not day one. This recounting isn't even day 365. This recounting is some 4 decades, almost 3 or 4 decades later.
Now, when Ostman goes about describing the old ladies, means the young guy's mom, he brings the weight up quite a bit. He says the woman's hair on the forehead had an upward turn like some women have. They call it bangs. Among women's hairdos nowadays, the old lady could have been anything between 40 and 70 years old. She was over 7 feet tall. She would be about 500 to 600 pounds. So he jumped the weight up for the old lady. He said she had very wide hips and a goose-like walk. Now that's interesting.
Yep.
It said she was not built for beauty or speed. Some of those lovable braziers, I guess he's trying to say brazier,
yeah.
And uplifts would have been a great improvement on her looks and figure. The man's eye teeth were longer than the rest of the teeth, but not long enough to be called tusks. Okay, well,
and that seems to be a bit of that seems to be a bit off base from what we know about Sasquatch sightings. So
said the old man must have been near 8 feet tall, big barrel chest, and a big hump on his back. Okay, now that's interesting.
Yep.
That muscular. First of all, he described a sagittal crest. That's interesting. He describes a big hump on his back on the old man's. Okay, that's a muscle structure on the back of a primate, and that connects the shoulders and the back of the neck to the head. So he's doing good when he's talking about his primate anatomy there. To be somebody that never seen a gorilla before, that's pretty dang good. Now, he was asked why, since he had a 30-30 rifle, I believe is what it was.
But then again, Chris, let me back up and saying he's telling this story now in 1957.
Right.
So there are gorillas in zoo. He's probably had the opportunity to look at gorillas.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
That's true.
So,
yes.
Right. He's only claiming this happened back in 1924.
Yes.
So there's
well, it could have been a made-up story that he set the time as in this happened in 1924.
And let me say this too. John Green would argue saying, well, Albert did say this in front of a local magistrate and signed an affidavit that it was true, which, puts him under the penalty of perjury. But if I say I had a Twinkie this morning for breakfast, and I'll sign an affidavit to that.
Right.
Who can prove me wrong?
Yeah, that's true.
Who
We'd
can
have to ask
prove me
Sherry.
wrong? She wasn't home.
Oh, okay. Well,
So there's always, well, where's the wrapper? The wrapper's thrown away in the trash can. You want to go,
so basically, an affidavit means nothing if he's telling the story to begin with. Yeah.
Especially when it's some 30 some odd years later, 33 years later.
Right.
34 years later. Or no, 33 years later. So how can you go back and prove something, especially when there's no physical evidence either way that occurred 34 years ago? Are you going to find a witness? Have you ever seen this guy? Well, geez, it's been 34 years. I don't remember what happened on this. Do you remember what happened on April 15th in 1984? Let's go. Well, that's 40 years, but let's go back, say 1994. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I was probably filing my taxes.
Right, hang on.
Yeah.
That was a good one, Chris. That was a good one.
April 15th, man. That was too easy. No, but, the story is interesting.
Right.
And it has a lot of good things in it. And I got to say, if Albert Ostman made it up, he did a great job. A great job.
Sure.
There are a few things. His physical descriptions, which he could have gotten from seeing a gorilla in the 1950s.
Or reading other Sasquatch reports or hearing about other Sasquatch reports, because you got to remember.
At that time, though, Steve,
At that time, you had John Green writing quite a bit about it.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah. I can give you that, yeah. But it's not like he had the internet to look at that time.
Right. But you had the newspapers, and when you come from British Columbia and you had a John Green writing articles in British Columbia about Sasquatch, it's kind of like having the internet that time. And our good friend O'Meady Palace says 1957 was a busy year. Loads of Yeti articles from 1957 and an expedition in the Ural Mountains. So.
And Ostman had told John Green, when John Green had asked him why he didn't shoot it, and he said, no, he saw a movie about these guys using high-powered rifles in Africa, was trying to shoot a gorilla, and they had to shoot it several times, and it just kept coming after them. Well, I went and reviewed, and sure enough, from the 1950s, there's a black and white movie, and you can find pieces of it on YouTube. I can't remember the name. It's not there for right now, but these guys look like locals, had, bolt action. I'm not sure if they were English infield rifles or not. I think they were infields. It may not have been. Yeah. But sure enough, they were shooting high-powered rifles and trying to shoot this gorilla. And it was giving them a rough time. It didn't want to die.
So here's my idea, and I'll put this out to the. What I can do is I will, and I haven't done this before, is I will go down line by line of Ostman's story straight out of the article.
Yeah.
And I will give it a psychological look. Does it make psychological sense? Like the Bigfoot peeper. Like, the Bigfoot peeper case. Like, does everything he say seem like something would someone do if they were faced with that situation?
Yeah.
For example, I always say this to Bigfoot peeper, grabbing the gun only after 8 minutes. Why now? Made psychologically no sense. So I can do that. Should be. So yes, Ostman did sign an affidavit, but like I said, an affidavit is nothing if it's not recent. If I sign an affidavit about something that happened last week, guess what? I probably can find some witnesses, or if I have somebody in front of me that says, and signs an affidavit in front of me saying X, Y, and Z, I probably can go back to somebody as a witness because it's only a week removed, or even 2 weeks removed, or even a month removed. But when you go back 33 years, like I said, Chris, what were you doing February 2nd? I don't know. 1990.
I have no idea.
Me neither. Me neither.
I have no idea.
Right. I don't even know what day of the week it is.
I was alive on planet Earth somewhere.
I don't
even know what state I was in or country. But some of the details that Albert Ostman added into the story were really juicy tidbits and really good. Thought-provoking. True or not, if the story's true, the tidbits ring true. The little details he added ring true. If the story was made up, the little tidbits he added were a stroke of genius.
Now,
very good.
Let me explain a little bit what I think. If you listen to Bob Gimlin, recall the events leading up to the film. There are spots in his, and this, I'm going to go back to his discussions he had in the 90s. Yeah. About the same time period, that Ostman started recounting his. And there were gaps like, I'm not sure, how did they get the film over there? Because I don't know. Al Delatly had some friend that had connections with the Kodak lab up there, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. The problem I'm seeing here is there is a lot of detail, right? If he had said this a couple of weeks afterwards or a month afterwards,
agreed,
I would expect there to be a lot of detail. But to have such intricate details
from 1924 to 1957,
right?
That's a lot better than me.
A lot of embellishment,
right?
And that is how they caught Susan Smith, who told her original story. And then as she retold the story, there was more embellishments, until you get this very detailed story when the details should have come out in the first interview.
Yeah.
And it was all rather recent. But as the weeks gone by, the story got more and more complicated.
There's a lot of the intimate details there was one detail in the story that was not included. Okay, this was just what he told John Green on the side, and it's been reported somewhere because I've read it somewhere. I did not get this directly from John Green, okay, but Ostman had reportedly told John Green. This is a very difficult subject. I just want to say when we're talking about the male Sasquatch's reproductive system, his organs, I'm not going to go any further than that. Albert Ostman had told Green that the old man was very modest, okay, very modestly, underwhelmingly.
He had a small winky.
Yeah. Now, that rings true with that rings true with gorillas. You're not going to this is a difficult subject, but anyway, that part rings true as well. You don't see, and there are reports when people say that they saw a male Bigfoot. And they say it was obviously male. Well, I have a problem with that. because most of the other primates, and we're not talking humans, well, physiology, when you speak of a gorilla, you're not going to see that as being overwhelmingly jump out at you. So the feature that he mentioned being underwhelmingly under-endowed, okay, that rings true. And how would he come up with that in his mind? You know, if he did, it's a genius. If he came up with it, made it up out of his mind, he's a genius.
Yeah, I don't know. Just a good storyteller. You know, look at The Creature by Jan Clement, aka John Tomical.
Yeah.
Okay, that is
pretty
a very
good. Pretty
detailed book, but he was a science professor and read up on Sasquatch sightings prior to writing the book.
Right.
Okay. So you look at, and it's amazing, you know, how that was discovered.
Right.
It was amazing having the tools I had at my disposal to use that to compare it to, okay, I have a biography of this guy, John Tomical.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at the story and I'm reading all these comparisons. Right. And they're all lining up and matching. And then to come across the, Library of Congress that, Jan Clement is a pseudonym of John Tomical.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. Bingo.
Even listed in the Library of Congress. It's pretty good.
And that I find so hard to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, is it plausible? Possibly, but I just, in my own, now, that's my opinion. I assure you, if I do this right up on actually the psychological makeup, does Ostman's reaction seem normal and consistent throughout his accounting? I will do this from an unbiased point. Well, because that's how I operate when I investigate something. I clear all my thoughts of, okay, let's look at this. Does that make sense?
He originally had commented that he remembered that somebody had escaped from a bull by more or less blinding it with snuff. They blew snuff powder or threw snuff powder in its eyes. Okay. And then from that, we have the Sasquatch that likes snuff. Now that's also kind of strange. But as curious as these things are, if you compare them with other primates, now I've had some experience being around chimpanzees. And let me tell you, if you had a can of snuff, I never tried it, but if you had a can of snuff, I'll bet you money they would try it.
Okay,
I don't know if they
what I've learned is this.
Yeah.
Yeah, his description sounds pretty damn good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So I've learned something a couple of weeks ago when I was researching that person's video claiming it was a trail cam.
Right.
And I had mentioned it on the video, something called the Chewbacca defense, which originally was a South Park joke, but it has become a thing. You can Google it. There's actually a term now called the Chewbacca defense. If any of the most best one is, the OJ trying the gloves on.
Right.
Now, there is also a variation of the Chewbacca defense. Like, this story is so cockamamie.
Right.
But let me add a few details in there that's going to detract from that craziness.
Yes.
Right. The Chewbacca defense is just a term it's coined. It's not something new. It's something that's been going on ever since man existed.
Yes.
So what I'm could possibly be, not saying that this is the case, but hey, listen, I'm going to give these great descriptions of these biological creatures, which will make it seem I am telling the truth, and I am going to distract you using those facts from the storyline, which is crazy.
Right.
We say, the gloves don't fit, so you must have quit. Let's forget the fact she's wearing rubber gloves under it. Let's You know, it's all a distraction. Oh, look, they don't fit, right? But we're forgetting the blood DNA found on the Bronco. We're forgetting the cut on his hand. We're forgetting all the the witnesses seeing him scoot into. We're forgetting the fact that for some strange reason his Bronco was parked on the street crooked, like it was hardly parked. We're forgetting all that. We're forgetting about Cato Kalin hearing a boom, on his air conditioner, where they found the one glove. We're forgetting about the bloody sock in the bedroom they found, which, so that's the distraction. Hey, look at all this. It's the way saying, well, hey, look, it's eyes and this, they're not human. They don't match up. And so we should forget about any disbelief of the story, right?
No, John, I didn't burn the chimp. I gave him a smoke. Okay, come on, man.
Why? Who? What?
John Swan said Chris burned that chimp. No, I gave him a smoke, and he enjoyed it. He loved it, and chewing gum, candy. They love candy, chewing gums. That one loves smokes, loves cigarettes.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? So who knows?
Chimp, no. I love those little guys.
Plausible story, possibly, but these are just things to think about. I'm not saying either way here. Could very well be a true story.
Yeah.
Could very well be laced with BS. But you got to understand, there are people that will tell these stories. On Nikki's show, we talked about this paranormal investigator, Norm Glasser, who had supposedly this great reputation, who came up with the Bigfoot picture that was looking in his car window, and he took a picture with his infrared camera, and it turned out it was the head of the same flat rock creature. And then everybody had to go back and look at all his other evidence. So people can tell, and Steve Alcorn interviewed him and even said that he was fooled by him. People can tell good stories at times. People can say, oh, sure, I'll sign an affidavit. Why not? Who's going to prove him wrong? It's not like there's going to be a massive state investigation on it. To me, and I understand John's philosophy, and I understand John's thinking that was important. But as a professional investigator, I've seen a lot of people lie in court under oath, including a 16-year-old, right? So in front of a judge, an event that happened a month previously with,
yeah.
What's the likelihood of proving perjury? Perjury is one of the hardest charges to prove. So,
Chance said, but why was Ostman so right on when not much was even known? That makes sense. Yeah.
But what was he right about? The way a gorilla looked?
Yeah.
Right? Again, this is 1957. He's telling the story. We're not forget about 1924. If he's making this up, he's making this up in 1957, not back in 1924. There are gorillas in zoos in 1957.
Yeah.
There's books on the Yeti already in 1957. So I don't know. Is this something this guy said, oh, I read some books on the Yeti, and I hear these ruminations that this guy, John Green, is investigating Bigfoot and a Yeti in Canada. Oh, who knows?
Well, to me...
But then again, he could be completely legitimate. We don't know. But
I liked I really do like Ostman's story. I like the details that he shared about the creatures, and it seems to me that would be perfectly acceptable if he were remembering those details of his time in captivity with these creatures. I would be willing to accept that 100%. yes, that's going to be something that sticks with you. Okay. But when he comes up with, and Steve mentioned this previously, when Ostman starts talking about all these really intricate details of the camp he had set up prior to that, wait a minute.
Yeah, now Chris is starting to go, hey, wait,
wait a minute.
And the whole intricate details of the trip leading into it. I mean, every little detail was there. And that, to me, of in itself could be an issue, considering, now, is it possibly could have remembered? Sure, this could have been such a prolific event that everything stuck in his mind. But truthfully, you have to look at it from a psychological standpoint. And this is just off the top of my head. I will revisit this when I completely do the story. But getting kidnapped by a Sasquatch is a pretty significant and traumatic event, wouldn't you say?
I would be traumatized, most definitely, yes.
But the curious thing about this, throughout the entire story, Ostman does not seem too traumatized by it, does he? Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that. Because I'll tell you what, if something like that happens, all those little intricate details of setting your camp up and, the weather was this and all this way, that's gone.
Those are gone,
Right, those are gone. And we know the trauma that real witnesses that see just one cross the road.
Yeah.
Right? The trauma they go through sometimes.
Right.
So I'm having an issue with that therein.
Yeah.
Just saying, you got to understand, this is a traumatic event. How would you act if you were kidnapped by a Bigfoot? I tell you how I'd be. All of a sudden I woke up and I'm being carried off by something that's large, and I'd be in a effing panic.
Yeah.
No lie.
Yeah. If I had been picked up in my sleeping bag with my firearm in there with me, that thing would have been emptied. Why? I'm sorry, but I would have been emptying that firearm into whatever was carrying me until I got put down. I would be traumatized beyond belief.
So I always say that the detail is in, the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
It'll tell you whether or not they're acting right. Common sense, a little
right. Yeah. The details from his time in captivity, I fully accept that would be burned into his memory.
Right.
The intricate details of his camping and the days prior to that, no. No. Now,
Chance Lambert, our good friend over there, our new good friend, says it's happened before. If I remember correctly, some gal got wrapped up in her tent and got carried until she was dropped some 3 miles away. I would like to see.
I don't know that one.
I don't know it either, but if that is a story and it's rather recent,
sure,
or it was recent when she came out and said, "Oh, last week this happened to me."
Yeah.
I'm not saying that hasn't happened before, but I would like to see the story of that and compare it to Ostman. How was her reactions? What was her descriptions? What was, you have to take everything on a case-by-case basis. Just because that's happened to her doesn't necessarily add to we have to look at each thing separately, right?
Right.
Just because this guy robbed the bank 10 years ago, and the bank now down the block, he's served his jail sentence, he's living, and 3 blocks away a bank is robbed in his neighborhood, doesn't mean he did it. Right. You have to investigate that separately than, oh, well, this guy did this before, it's got to be related to that. You have to separate those things. That's just investigative principle.
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm poo-pooing it or knocking you down for it. I'm trying to give you investigative, and that's what I try to do, at least on this show, is give some people some investigative thought processes, that this is separate. Each case is separate. So just because it happens here, we can't use that to support or propagate that unless there is a consistent pattern of that occurring. Like, I saw Bigfoot cross the road here. I saw a Bigfoot cross the road there. This person saw a Bigfoot cross the road. Well, does Bigfoot cross the road? Well, obviously, right? But when you have a one-off or even two-off, well, this person claims this person claims that, and they're similar, well, there may be a pattern there. But then again, we have to look at each case separately and evaluate them as to what the credibility of the story, the background. Of course, I always say this, the first thing you do is look at victimology, which is the background of the person making the claim, because the person carried away is the victim. The person that saw the Bigfoot is the victim. The person that provides the Bigfoot photo is the victim. So you have to look at their background first. What are they about? What do they know about Bigfoot? What's their beliefs? Have they watched Bigfoot on TV before? Have they, any predisposed notions? Maybe they were non-believers. Maybe they were believers. Maybe they believe in, all kinds of sorts of wild and abstract things. Those all become very important in that process of understanding your witness, and then you can get into their story once you understand the background. And the other stuff too is something we don't mention at all. What's their medical background? What's their personal background? Have they gone through a divorce recently? Have they had a death in the family recently? Have they had any kind of mental illness? Are they on certain medications? All of that becomes very relevant in understanding your witness, right? And when people ask me, well, why? Because it's going to support your case. I have to go into these things and make clear you of these things to make sure it supports your case.
Steve, you got kind of blurry. Oh, there you are. You're back now. You got kind of blurry there for a second. I love the Albert Ostman story. And, I don't know if it's true. What I really do like are the details. Those are really great. I would love to see that made into a movie, because regardless whether the story is true or not, it would be a super great subject for a movie. And it would be a good movie. If somebody would just make it. Okay. Right. Put it out on DVD. I'll buy it. I'll watch. And matter of fact, I may even jump in with you on the producing part of it.
Yes. So B, or actually Kaiju Ninja mentioned that maybe there wasn't fear or emotion, but maybe that's just how Albert was. But even though he might not outwardly show fear or emotion, there's a couple other things in play too. He may be adding a little creative license to it to hide his actual fear or act like he was the big tough man. So there is that as well. Because let's face it, when we retell a story, sometimes we like to retell it to where we're the good guy and we're the protagonist in the tale. And, a protagonist cannot show fear. They cannot show. So there may be some of that at play too. So we have to evaluate. Man. That's why I can always say we have to evaluate every single line of what is written in this written account. And that's the way you have to do it. And then convert it to visualizing what was going on and understanding human behavior and understanding, is it consistent across the board? Because let's face it, if an explosion goes on outside, right, there's going to be a certain percentage that's going to look out the window. There's going to be a certain percentage of people that are going to get under a table to take cover. Yeah. And there's going to certain people that are just going to look up and go, shrug their shoulders. And that is based upon previous experience. And that's why it's also goes back to victimology,
Well, when I get up out of the floor, I will have my gun. Duck and cover and grab your gun if an explosion goes off.
Right. So it's tough when you that's why it's there is nothing like doing an interview with the person sitting across from you, reading their body language, being able to ask questions to elicit a response that will give you indicators whether or not they're being true or not. One of the more interesting things that I've noticed now that I'm picking up quite a bit is when people talk, every once in a while, they'll give either a one shoulder shrug or oh yeah, it was about, I saw that. Well, do you believe what you saw was a Bigfoot or a bear? It's a Bigfoot. And they start shrugging their shoulders. That shoulder shrug is indicative that they're not really sure about their statement. So there's little things like that, the raising of the eyes, like, oh, I saw a Bigfoot. And that's just like, I didn't take the cookie, as they're trying that the stress ridges on the foreheads.
Yeah, but, what gets me is just a direct question. Were you frightened when you first saw this thing? And if somebody tells me, oh, no, I felt what was it? I've heard some of them. I felt peaceful and calm. I'm like, well, that's a big, big red flag for me, because I don't care who you are. And it doesn't matter if you're a man's man and you're not scared of anything. If you walk up on one of these things and you're the equivalent of a 5-year-old kid looking up at his full-grown father,
right.
You're going to be frightened.
Right.
You are going to be frightened.
And truthfully, like when I had my sighting, I was not afraid, but I certainly wasn't peaceful and calm. I was like, oh, I was awestruck.
Well, you had some distance too. I mean,
right. I think
not much.
If I had walked right upon it, that bad juju.
You get a cold feeling in your soul.
Right. Or a very warm feeling in your pants.
Yeah.
Oops.
Have to sit there and physically remind yourself, do not run. Do not run. Because you're sure going to be wanting to. Guarantee it.
Yes, and thank you, B, the behavior panel. Yeah, they are a really good, group to learn from. I've taken their behavior class, so I learned a lot from that, and with certain aspects of body language is going on, adapters and such, and you have micro expressions and groupings of expressions that mean certain things. And, it's not, like I said, it's not 100% science, but when you have groupings of such, it tells you big stories. And so you can't always, but the other thing too is, like I said, I have thousands of hours interviewing and interrogating criminal suspects and criminals actually apprehended. And you learn a lot. You learn a lot about body language. You learn, how to spot a lie from a mile away, because a lot of times I'll talk to somebody, I'll already have the facts. It never ceases to amaze me. One thing I've always used, and it's always worked, is the question of, and people say to me, well, I wouldn't fall for that. Well, you're not guilty of anything right now. But when you're in that mindset, when you've done something wrong and you get called on the carpet from it, it changes your psychological profile automatically in your mind. Of course not. You're not going to fall for it now. But if you had stolen something and got questioned by law enforcement or by somebody like me, hey, guess what? Your mindset's going to change quite a bit. But the one thing that's always worked is if someone was to be, and I'm modeling this to our field, if somebody was caught hoaxing, do you feel that they should be publicly ostracized? And watch the person's reaction. Because if they say, well, I don't think we should, people make mistakes and blah, blah, blah. Now you're building in your mind that this person could be pulling your leg. Because a person who's really saw one, should they be publicly ostracized? Hell yeah. I saw the real thing. And then this person's going to come along and say they saw it too, and they're full of shit. That's
to the coals.
That's to the, that's so a lot of times, and I'm doing pre-interviews with people, I'll ask them, so I've seen all these things. So what do you think we should do with Osman size? What do you think we should do with people that we catch stealing, from the company? And all the guilty ones. And I already know they're guilty because I have the evidence there. I want to gauge the reaction, though. And they'll be like, I don't know.
Well, you should let them go.
No, normally they won't say let them go. They may say, talk to them and give them another chance. Or, most of the time, 90% of the time, it's, I don't know. Maybe they, I don't know. That's not my job. I have no idea. But you talk to somebody that's innocent and they're like, they should be fired and put in jail. Right? Because they're, the reason why they're downplaying that's because they're, and you always see it in their eyes too. They look right down. I don't know. It's so telltale. And they're always sitting there like, so my whole idea is when I speak to somebody and they're sitting there like this is to get them to come out a little bit. Yeah. So I don't always start on what I'm sitting there talking about. I try to get to know them, try to build some
eye contact. Yeah.
Build some rapport with them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll already know the background of a person a bit. So I see her, in an employee case, okay, I see you've worked here for so many years and you make this amount and, hey, I appreciate what you do. I've talked to your supervisors and they say y'all do a great job around here. In a criminal case, I may say, hey, you know what? We all make mistakes. I understand that. I get that. You go to school. You have any kids? Where do you work?
Yeah.
And if they know, oh, no, I don't have any work. I know the economy's really rough right now, isn't it? And, I know it's tough to find a job. So I get that. I understand that. And I understand you got to do what you do to get by. And I get that. Yeah. So what I really like to know is where does this stuff go after you steal it?
Yeah.
And then you'll get them on where I sell it around. Do you sell it around to good people? Where do you sell it? Do you sell it to the people on the street or you sell it to a shop? Because the person that, you're selling it to a shop, hell, they're paying you pennies on the dollar for the stuff. They're really taking advantage of you, aren't they? By doing that. And you're taking all the risk, right? Yeah. You see how I'm building that up.
Right.
And that's what a good interrogator does. They don't sit there and get the rubber hose or shine the light or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I would never fart around with the little petty stuff. Oh, how many pens have you taken from the? No, I never would start. I could care less about that BS. And
we saw you with that book of matches.
Frankly, that would be a real rookie move to concentrate on that stuff. And I'm very far well removed from being a rookie because I have been interrogating people now for 35 years. 35 years I've been at this. So I'm doing this longer than most people do 25 and out. I'm already at 35. And I still got a good 10, 15 left to go with me. And I could tell stories just about criminals I've interviewed over the years and some of the capers that have happened. And not many people can say that I personally, myself, have taken down an entire organized retail theft ring by myself pretty much. And that was a 3-4 month long investigation. When I was done with that, I had a binder this thick. Turned out that I had gotten them responsible for over $31,000 in stolen merchandise. And it was all, and they were stealing cash money, but they were stealing the goods, returning it, getting store credit for all that stuff.
Oh, that's bad.
Right. And they were avoiding the systems by trucking their licenses. And by the time I got done with it, they had 2 people that would go in and take the items. And you would not even suspect them. They were both like 23, 24 years old. A guy and a girl. They would walk in very well dressed, take the items, walk out, and their mule would come in and return the stuff. And then they would pay the next amount of dollars, and then that card would go to basically the ringleader, the guy who was fencing all the cards. And it turns out he had a Facebook page with the business that he was paying people for gift cards that he no longer wanted. That was the guise of it.
Yeah.
But what he was really doing was paying these criminals to steal stuff and return and get these credits so he can in turn sell them on the web, or in some cases use them for his own gain.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Oh my goodness, Sharon's dealing with nerve pain. Yeah. Well, if people recall, I was supposed to be on a couple of shows last Monday, including Jeff's show, and I had started physical therapy Monday morning, and I was a hurting unit. My nerve pain was really bad. But I'm glad to say that I'm doing much better.
I hope you get to feeling better soon, too.
Not
Sharon.
100%, but I'm a lot better than I was a week ago. So only getting better. But yeah. So by the time that whole ring got taken down, there was 11 people involved. I identified 10 people. It resulted in 10 arrests. Actually, it involved 12 people, but the 12th person had died of a drug overdose.
Oh man,
it was a wild caper. And I was dealing with, I had to deal with the state police because it had occurred in so many different counties and jurisdictions.
Yeah.
That I went to, and I was actually having weekly meetings with the head of the intelligence unit for the state police over this whole thing. So, incredible stuff. And certain people want to doubt my credentials.
Yeah, well, we know that the Squatch Detective is a real qualified first-rate detective. And don't worry, Steve, we also know that Steve Kulls is one of the few, I don't know, maybe one of the only people on YouTube in this career field, in the cryptozoology field, that is, to ever have his own National Geographic special. So, until you get your own NatGeo special, don't be throwing rocks at the Squatch Detective because.
Well, you know what pisses me off, Chris? And I'm going to take an editorial note right now because it just dawned on me. You know what pisses me off the most?
Let me have it.
And folks, please pardon my language, but I'm really offended at being fucking called a Nazi. And you know why? Because my father was in Patton's 3rd Army, the 9-4 Signal Company, and fought those bastards. And now that I think about it, it pisses me off that you would call me that. Listen, scumbag, because that's what you're being. My family bled for this country against those bastards. Don't ever, ever call me that. Okay, I'm done.
I don't blame you. So,
thank you. It just all of a sudden it clicked in me. I said, you know what? You got talking about that, and I thought about my father.
Yeah.
And
well, I was wondering what I was going to do tomorrow, but I think I'll shoot up some old appliances in the yard. Oh, me.
That's all. I'm done. It's out of my system now. No apologies needed.
No.
I'm a big boy. I'm tough skinned, but you know what? He doesn't know who the flip I am. Just shows his ignorance. And You know, yeah. You can't use the jealous card. He used the hater card. Oh, he's a hater. Well, I wasn't a hater until you called me a Nazi. Not a hater until you called me a Nazi. Now I'm a hater. You want to stereotype people like my co-host or me. You want to talk about how screwed up and obsessed you are, saying something about an appliance in the backyard when, yeah, I got a washing machine on the back of my house that you catch in one of my videos for a very brief second because we have a quarterly get your crap out of Dodge pickup. So, hey, you know what? I can get rid of this thing for free, or I can pay somebody $150 for picking it up today. I'm not using it. It was wintertime. Hey, guess what? The backhoe's coming this week, and out it goes. But you got to bring it up and stereotype people like I'm some kind of hillbilly.
Oh, man.
Well, no, sir. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not as sophisticated as you because you've worked in IT all your life and maybe you've been a sound engineer and location scout and all of that bullshit.
Well,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm done.
Let's cool off.
I had to let that out of my system.
Cool off.
And I had enough fury in my system today to match yours and if not more, but
don't be angry, Steve.
No.
I decided not to be angry because we've done our job. Everybody on the channel knows it, that someone on YouTube, and I won't mention the person's name, was claiming to have a trail cam photo of a Bigfoot, which we proved to everyone, and everybody here already knows it, that it was not a trail cam photo. It was a photo of...
It's not that I'm mad at him. I'm laughing at him, actually, because he's so torn up about it. He's so obsessed with, video after video now. It's nothing about how bad he's being treated and victimizing himself.
Oh, my
when
God.
all we did was point out the truth.
Yeah.
But
that's all you get here, the truth.
What aggravates me is that I just want to get that message out to people that are under his influence that, hey, guess what? He's full of crap when it comes to stereotyping you and me. He's full of crap. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know my background. You know, how dare he call? You know what? Here's another thing. My uncle served on the USS Ludlow during World War II, U.S. Navy, lied about his age. He went in at 17, told him he was 18. Gave up his professional baseball career with the New York Giants as a pitcher to join the Navy for World War II. And his ship, the Lucky Lud, was torpedoed by a U-boat in the Mediterranean.
Wow.
Causing him to fall 7 decks. Permanently disabled in his arm, had a steel plate put in his arm and his leg, took him out of the war. Ruined his professional baseball career.
Yeah.
Right? I want to talk about bleeding against those friggers. The goose steppers.
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Call me in again. Right? My godfather served in a submarine in the European theater of war. In the Mediterranean as well. So I take that a little offense to that because while he may think it's apropos because that's what his type does is when you disagree with me, you're a Nazi. Well, you haven't met a family that's actually fought the Nazis, have you? Well, you have now. And as a matter of fact, here's another interesting story. That when Hitler took power in 1931, my grandfather emigrated from Germany in 1898 to the United States. My father was born in 1919. And shortly before my father's one of his birthdays, my grandfather, being an immigrant from Germany, actually had gotten a letter from the Third Reich asking my grandfather to send my father to the fatherland.
Wow.
To serve the Reich. And my grandfather looked at the letter, ripped it up, and he says, I'm not giving these Nazi bastards anybody from my family.
Yeah.
And into the garbage it went.
Oh, man.
So that's just the tip of the iceberg. People talk about racism. I feel so sorry for my grandfather and my grandmother and my young aunt, who was probably a small child, even to my father to an extent, growing up. They were very much discriminated against. And because who did we fight in World War I?
Yeah.
The Germans. So my father, as a child in grammar school, was ridiculed by other children for being German.
Yeah.
Called, oh, you're a Heine, you're a Heine, you're a Heine. I remember those stories. So don't tell me my fucking family doesn't know that side of the story either. That's what people forget. That's what people forget. Somehow the Italians got a pass for oh, well. The Italian side of my family. But yeah, that's there it is. It's all out there on the line. Now you know me, folks, and my audience knows me. John Swan said the Kaiser, yes, makes great rolls. Delicious. And truthfully, the funny thing is my grandfather owned a bakery in New York City. That's what he did for a living. He was a baker, and he owned his own bakery. He did move it to Chicago for a while, but moved back to New York City.
Yeah.
And somewhere in my family photo albums, I've actually digitalized some of them, a picture of my uncle and my father standing with my grandmother outside the bakery. So really cool stuff.
Well, let's just leave this. This ship has sailed.
But no, now people know my background.
Yeah,
I'm a very proud of my family's involvement in the big war.
Well, it's not like you're keeping your identity secret. I mean, it says Steve Kulls right there, and I've seen you along with everybody else. I've watched you on TV.
Now, am I perfect? No. I'll let you know. If you hadn't noticed, I can be a little hyper at times. That's because as a child, I was hyperactive. Yep, I was hyperactive. And at a very young age, I was put on Ritalin, but I was taken off it because it was making me nervous. So, yeah, I mean, we all have hang-ups, dude. We all have hang-ups. We all have our things. People also don't know that I worked with the developmentally disabled for 3 years. Chris knows that.
Yep.
And they taught me a lot of patience. Patience, yep. Something I never had all my life, but working with those kids taught me patience. They taught me just as much as I taught them. I worked as a counselor in a group home for disadvantaged youth. And these were kids that either ran afoul of the law, but it wasn't serious enough to put them in a detention facility, or maybe their parents had issues with the law and they got locked up, or maybe their parents had drug addictions. And I worked with them. And there was one kid who just wrote me recently that I keep to myself, but he remembered me, and he always said how inspirational I was to him, to lift him up. And he feels today he is a better person because of that. And if that's my only accomplishment in life, despite having 3 very successful children, which I do have 3 very successful kids, that has some great career paths. My oldest, a forest ranger, state forest ranger, which is actually, in New York State, he's technically a police officer because they have police powers. My daughter, who is this wonderful medical technician that's worked as an ER tech, that's worked as a phlebotomist, that's worked as, a lot in the medical field. And I was a paramedic at one time myself, and a firefighter. And my youngest, who works for Homeland Security.
Well,
so I have worked.
Let me do a quick interview with you here, Steve.
Nick, I love you. Yes, I do. Hey, listen, I'm Kraut myself. I'm German.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris. You said you wanted to.
Well, let me just do a quick interview. I'm gonna ask you a few questions. Do you do the YouTube channels and stuff? You do websites and stuff for money? Is that the only reason you do this? Because
no. That matter of fact, when we started this, there was no monetization. Hey, if I can make a buck out of it now, that's awesome. Yeah. But that's not the reason why I do it. And I've always said that if I'm going to make a buck out of this, I'm going to do it the hard way. I'm going to do it the honest way. I'm not going to shortcut it and try to say everything is Bigfoot or try to snowball people. I love my audience. I respect my audience way too much to do that.
And you would tend to say that your channel is geared more towards education and truth, would you not?
That's right, but I have to gear it towards entertainment because I don't want to run afoul of YouTube's educational platforms.
Yeah, right.
Because we do provide entertainment as well. I've always called it edutainment. We try to have a little fun, have a few laughs, and at the same time educate and
that's the thing. We can talk about the subject and joke around and have a good time as we go. And I think that's better. A lot of times, when you have an uncomfortable subject, and sometimes a little humor interjected into that makes it a little bit more relatable to everybody.
Here's another interesting fact. Ich spreche Deutsch, aber nicht so gut. I do speak some German.
Das ist good.
And that's because a lot of times in my household and in my father's household with his father, they all spoke German. So my father could speak very fluent German, which was a plus for when he went over to the European theater. Because a lot of times I kept him alive because he was a sergeant. They said, we need a mess sergeant. And we're using all these POWs as help in the kitchen. So since you speak German, you're going to be the mess sergeant. Yeah. And that's what he did all day. He worked alongside of a lot of really shady friggin' people. But they worked, and they worked proudly, and they wanted to be put to work. Because to them, it was better than sitting around all day, pondering their fate.
Yeah.
And he never for 1 second hung around with them or chummed around with them. He just remembers a couple of things that were said to him by a couple of them. He was in the occupation of Czechoslovakia after the war. And, here's an interesting story. He remembers when tensions were very high with the Russians at the time. Yeah. And he recalls that he was guarding a POW camp in Czechoslovakia when one of the SS officers said to him, we're not your real enemy now. They're your real enemy. And he was pointing at the Russians. And at the time, this was just before the Cold War started.
Yeah.
So there was always a little truth to that. He goes, but make no mistake, the Germans were our enemies and lock, stock, and barrel at the time.
Well, those Russians really didn't like the Germans too, boy. I can't say as I blame them, No.
But to have that knowledge of a man who grew up through the Great Depression, who before World War II worked at the Brooklyn Navy Yard as a welder, was supposed to ship out to Pearl Harbor the day before it got bombed, but missed his flight.
Right.
And after that, they say, well, you don't need to go to Pearl Harbor anymore. We're shutting down operations there right now. And had already served with the New York National Guard from, I think, 37 to 1939, and worked from the Brooklyn Navy Yard from 39 to 42, and then he got drafted in 42. So he never really went through D-Day. He was with Patton's Third Army, so he was, they were holding them back till after D-Day, and then had them sweep in through Sicily into Italy, and then around that way and through the Ardennes. And that's, so yeah, I mean, I was just blessed to get a lot of stories that my generation, at least, and I'm an old guy now, but even Chris, I mean, I got a generation of stories ahead of you because my father was 50 when I was born. So my father was a generation older than most fathers. It had some disadvantages, very true. So I'm like a generation behind everybody, and really that I get along fine with people 10, 15 years older than me all the time. Yeah. I mean, I can relate to the, to the neighbor across the street who is, very attentive to every little detail of his house.
Yeah.
I get that. I've seen that before in my own father.
Well, my grandfather was drafted in World War II, and I really didn't get any of those stories. He died in 1979, and I really didn't get any of those stories. He was a very quiet man, a very private man, and he didn't consider war stories as being something to tell. It was a private matter. He did what he had to do, and that's it. He didn't want to talk about it. But he did bring home an Arisaka rifle. He was evidently, as far as I know, in the Japanese theater. And he brought back an Arisaka rifle, which I don't know for sure, but I think one of my uncles has it now.
Well, my father brought back an SA dagger. Not an SS dagger, an SA dagger, which were the brown shirts, the ones that preceded World War II. And it was an Ernst Röhm dagger, and you could tell because it had been ground on the one side to take Ernst Röhm's name off it. And Röhm was killed by Hitler in the Night of the Long Knives in 1934. And he did that to consolidate, to get the army behind him, because the army was like, you can choose the SA or you can choose us. Take your pick. And he also brought back a German police officer's Degman, which, if you look under the hilt, there is a very tiny SS stamp on it, which meant that was actually belonged to Gestapo.
Yeah.
And they went house to house searches for that kind of stuff, and that's what he got to bring back. I tried to bring back a Luger, but somehow that got lost. Because all the guys had Lugers, but maybe someday I will share a couple of. Maybe someday I'll share some more stories, because some of his stories were freaking hysterical. I asked him once when I was a young man if he had ever killed anybody in the war. And he turned around to me and he said, son, because I'd rather not talk about that.
Yep.
Because he got sent to the front with 2 weeks left to the war. He was at the replacement camp at Remagen, Germany. If you ever heard that, the story Bridget Remagen, or the movie Bridget Remagen, that's where my father was. Yeah. So.
Well, you know what, Steve? We have just about. We don't have enough time to talk about this last Squatch story either.
Maybe for another night.
We've got we'll do that next time. We kind of got off subject there a little bit there at the last,
but I feel that sometimes that I want my audience to know me.
Yeah.
You know, to know where I come from, what stock I've come from, why I carry myself the way I do sometimes, and why the truth is important to me. And Jesus, this chair, I'm going to get rid of it soon. It tends to, thank you, Chance. He says, you know, so you don't go blaming yourself, but when you get something wrong, usually it is something small, and admit it to it, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Even if something big, Chance, I admit it. That's the stock I'm made of. If you're a man makes a mistake, you be a man and admit to it. That's what my father taught me.
That's it.
That's what my father taught me. You treat women with respect. You treat people of other races, other religions, you treat them with respect.
Yeah.
I don't judge a person. Well, the dog just shook. I don't judge a person on anything but their actions.
Yep.
You know, and it doesn't matter if their actions were 10, 15 years ago and they haven't done anything since. Okay, they've learned their lesson. It's not worth even bringing up. You know, and here's another fun fact. I wanted to be a veteran. I wanted to be. Unfortunately, when I was 17, I signed for the early entry program into the United States Navy. My original designation was going to be a nuclear technician because I had scored so well on the ASVABs when it came to electronics. Unfortunately, during the physical, they tended to say I was red-green colorblind, which turned out to be 4 or 5 years later proved false, because what it was my astigmatism that was affecting my perception of red-green. If my eyes focused, I could see red-green just fine. So, unfortunately, I opted, when they gave me the jobs available at the Navy, I decided I don't want to be a medic in the Navy, and I don't want to be a payroll guy, because those were the two jobs they had offered me. I'm like, no, thank you. Because when I was going in as a nuclear technician, there was a bonus, there was rank. So I decided to serve my country a different way. And I became a volunteer firefighter and a volunteer ambulance emergency medical technician, which eventually turned into becoming a professional paramedic for 5 years for a company, and even a part-time paid firefighter for a while at the airport. But volunteered for a little over 12 years, 14 years, somewhere in there. So that is how I did my service for my country. And that's it. So now people know my story. So, Chris, it's time to wrap up.
Yeah, I think so. I've been reading the chat over here while I was listening to you. But I hope everybody's enjoyed the show tonight, and we appreciated having you. Sorry we got a little off tangent there, but there was something that happened that was kind of stressful, and I think Steve needed to get a little stress off this system. Me too. Me too, because when we tell somebody and we prove the truth, that's the truth is the truth. You can't change it, and you can double down if you've been proven wrong, and it's not going to change the fact that you're wrong. And so, if you can live with that, live with it. You've been shown the truth. If it's the first time watching YouTube, give the channel a like and a subscribe. If you don't, hit the dislike. either way, we'll get a bump in the algorithm. We appreciate our audience. We know we've got the best audience on YouTube by far. Some of the sharpest guys and gals you will ever find anywhere. And we thank you guys. You always do great questions, always great input. This show is about you. I mean, it's for you. And we love the participation. And I'm sorry that I'm going on, Steve, but I just can't get over how sharp these guys are and how proud I am of them. And you make it possible. We appreciate you being here with us.
And again, I apologize if I went on a rant the last 25 minutes of the show, but I felt it needed to be said. And I wanted to bore the trolls out of here before it was said. But the reason why I tell these things is because I love my audience, and I consider you all my friends out there. I love you guys. I truly do. And I don't want to do anything that would ever embarrass you or cause you to not enjoy this program. And I know not every program is going to be for every person. I get that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to see you guys to see me as an enemy. I don't want you guys to see me as somebody that's out to get somebody. The only thing I'm out to get to is the truth. And I know there's creatures out there. I've seen them twice. Seen them twice. Let me correct that. I've seen them twice. And this mystery means a lot to me. I have a passion for this. That's why I can take beating year after year after year and still keep coming back. I can take, this wasn't nothing, but it was one thing that got under my skin is how dare that happen to me. Somebody call me that name when they don't even know my family was so entrenched in fighting those people. And it kind of reminded me of my father being called the Heine. So, I love you guys. Thank you all for being here. We will catch you all up next week with a great show. I'm sure I got some plans for next week's show. And like I said, I'm going out and about this week with a familiar voice. Hopefully I can get him on camera, but you'll hear a familiar voice. So we're going to be having some film next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm not going to tell you where I'm going or what I'm doing, but it's going to be good. So everybody will catch you all here 9 p.m. Eastern next Sunday night on Squatch-D TV. Everybody have a happy, safe, healthy week. God bless. And, of course, keep on squatching. We'll catch you all in a little bit, my friends.
Hey folks, you've been watching Squatch-D TV. Join us each week, Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for the latest on the Bigfoot mystery. As always, we thank you for being our loyal viewers and encourage all to subscribe to our YouTube page at youtube.com/Steve Kulls. As always, have a great week. Stay safe. God bless and keep on squatching.